Hey, what's happening, everybody? Just a quick video to go through post-production in Photoshop. This one is primarily intended for those of you who are maybe new to rendering, and so the concept of post-production or what you might want to do in Photoshop might be very new to you. So I'm just going to stay in the corner of the screen down here, so I really just want you looking at the screen. So here we are in Photoshop. This is one of the, it's not the beta version of Photoshop, so it's just the standard release. So Photoshop 2025. You can see this is one of the renders. This is from another project, from another video, but it's a great one for a little bit of post-production. You can see we have our kind of grayish building. It's a little bit too gray everywhere, so we might change some of that. You'll also notice on the bottom left of the screen, if you can see where my mouse is moving there, it is 7,680, so it's basically an 8K image. The first thing that you'll want to do, and by the way, I put in two little imperfections up here in the top right of the screen, these black dots, just to explain to new users how you might want to go about fixing some issues that may occur. Sometimes you will get black spots or white spots or just, areas where a render just didn't work for whatever reason. It's not that common, but it does, it happens enough for you to know how to fix it in Photoshop. So here we are with our layers panel. By the way, if that's not visible, you should go Window and Layers or F7. Background layer is by default locked. So what we tend to kind of do, you can just click on the little padlock to unlock it. And the layers palette can be kind of moved around or docked wherever you want. I like to keep it floating, usually up here. Now, one other thing to note is I've gone into the layers settings here, these three dots right here. And I've gone down to panel options, and I like my thumbnails to be really, really large. It's just personal preference. Some people, I don't know why you'd want them small, but I like to see what's on each layer. Next thing we'll do is right-click and duplicate this layer. And, the background layer is generally, like I usually know it as just BKG background. So I'm just going to type in new BKG, new background. Generally, you want to keep everything that you're doing on its own layer in Photoshop. It's just, layers are great and all, but you want that level of kind of control, right? Where you can just be like, okay, I know what's on each layer. It's just good practice. All right, so that looks good. New background. So a couple of things we might want to do here. First thing, I'll just move this up a little bit, is go down to the adjustments right down here. And I'm going to go to just the actual levels. Now you'll see I've got a little panel here. I'm just going to click on the histogram just to update it. And I want Photoshop to basically just analyze this. So I'm going to click Auto. And you can see a couple of things. It just controls you that. Step back, Auto. So Photoshop is sort of looking at this image and is trying to basically balance out the levels. You can use levels. You can also use curves. People kind of have a preference on this one. I believe curves is technically the newer, maybe I'm wrong on that, is sort of the newer one. Again, just click Auto. You can see Photoshop just generally wants to brighten the image a little bit. So that's good enough for me. Sometimes it'll brighten the image a little bit too much, whether you're using curves or levels. And because we have this on a curve adjustment layer, we can just drop the opacity just a little bit, dropping down the strength of that adjustment. All right, I think that's a good starting base. Let's right-click and merge that down. And then I'm going to right-click and duplicate the new background one more time. So let's fix our issues before we go any further. So I'm going to just hit Z on the keyboard, or Z if you're American. And we're going to just zoom in, left-click here. I want to fix up these two dots. Over here on the left where we've got all of our tools, I'm going to go about halfway down. You should be able to see my mouse kind of shaking there a little bit, halfway down. And I'm going to use the Clone Stamp tool. This will work like a paintbrush. You can see I can make the brush kind of head larger or smaller. And the easiest thing to do is just tap Alt, hold down Alt, and just left click somewhere a little bit to the left, right, or below, somewhere around the area you want to fix. And then just left click and brush that in. And that's one easy way to fix these. Now, you could do some other fancier techniques. There are other ways. You can come down and use some of the, for example, the spot healing brush tool or the remove tool. Let's grab the remove tool. I'm going to make my brush here just a little bit bigger, just enough to fit. I'm just going to drag it over. And there we go. Basically letting Photoshop remove it. Either of those will work fine. There are other ways to do this. So, for example, we could do like, content-aware fill or something like that. But to me, Clone Stamp works for me. With those done, we're in a pretty good spot. So the first major thing we want to do is add a little bit of fog. But before that, I'm looking at the bottom left corner here, and I'm like, okay, there's a few spots here that are problematic. Look at this guy down here. If we zoom in, it's a very harsh edge. I wonder, can we fix that up just a little bit? Let's grab our clone stamp tool again. And I'm just gonna, I like this spot right here. I'm gonna Alt left click here. And I'm just gonna brush this ever so softly on here, just brushing back in. We're just trying to give the impression that the water isn't just kind of crashing into the rocks the way it was in Twinmotion. Now, a lot of these harsh edges, you kind of want to avoid harsh edges as much as you can if you're doing anything with nature in it. So I'm just gonna drag these guys out. There we go. Much nicer looking transition. Do the same over here as well, but I might drop the opacity so I get a bit of a fall off. So Alt-click to sample, and just drag this out over, and I'm just doing this ever so softly. I think that looks quite fine. There we go. Generally speaking, you want those softer edges. Now, if you have a larger section, like say this thing right over here, and you're like, okay, well, what if can I do something else over here? Yeah, there's a couple of other things. Let's try using content-aware fill. So I'm going to drag out a selection and then hit delete. And nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? Well, for a start, I have multiple layers. So if I want to do a content-aware fill on this, what I'm going to do is actually go up to Image and go to Duplicate. I'm just going to right-click and flatten all of these layers. Let me just zoom in on this really odd imperfection. I think this was where the rock was kind of floating above the water. Grab my rectangle marquee or selection tool, drag it over, and hit delete. And now we have options for content aware. Click OK, and it just fixes it like that. Lovely. So content aware, as far as I know, will only work on images with only one layer. I could be wrong on that, but that's kind of my experience. All right, Control A, Control C to copy. Let's go back over here and Control V. So now we've got this lovely layer 1. I think I'm pretty happy with all of these. I'm going to leave the very base layer down here intact, just in case we need something on there. I'm going to hold down Shift and select these 3 layers right here. The new background copy, and the layer 1, which was the content aware. Right-click and merge those layers. All right. Rename this one, New BKG, New Background again. And we will duplicate it one more time. Now here we're going to go then and start doing our color corrections on this. So you could speed things up by going down to the adjustment layer. And we're looking for color lookup. And with color lookup, you can use what's called a LUT. So LUTs, you can find them online. There's lots of them. There's tons of them available for free. And you could run down. A LUT is just a lookup table. Now, a LUT, however, is kind of very much a blank slate. It's kind of a one-size-fits-all. You know, oh, that one's actually pretty nice, the Fuji Eterna. The problem with these is you don't really have any controls. It's either on or it's off. Yes, you can adjust the opacity, but you can't control the individual elements. So a LUT, you might, if you like it, use it at the very start. It's just one way to go about doing it. But a LUT is very much a brute force fix. So I'm going to delete that guy. And instead, we're going to go up to Filter and Camera Raw Filter. So here we are. Camera Raw Filter is basically Lightroom within Photoshop. That's my understanding of it anyway. So it's going to allow us to adjust all the elements like the lights, the grain, the noisiness, the texture of this image. There are 2 ways to get up and running initially. The first thing you can do is go to where it says Profile and Browse. And you can see we've got a bunch of different sort of like, think of these as presets effectively, profiles. Generally, the only ones you're going to mess with, I think, are going to be these ones right here, which is the modern ones. You can kind of see, even just putting one of these on can very much change the look and feel of your image. And honestly, Modern 8 is one that I will use again and again and again. I kind of love what it does to the reds. It kind of moves the reds a little bit over. I think that looks really, really nice. The other option is to use, you can see we've got the Edit tab down here. We've got some other tools. The other option is to use a preset. So these are effectively Lightroom presets. Again, you can buy these online. You can find tons of free ones. The really good ones are probably paid for, but you can still find plenty of free ones that can get you up and running. And these can massively change the look and feel of your image. Kind of change the tone, the season, how dreamy it looks, or how overly sharp it looks. And you see, I got tons and tons of these. A lot of them you'll never really use, but when you buy them, they usually come in about packs of 10. And so you can kind of see we have tons of different options, but I don't want to do any of that. I want to just kind of cancel out of this. So I'm going to click the 3 dots here and just go back to reset to default. So this will show, there we go. There's our default. We're going to go through this manually. So what we're going to do is just make sure everything is just as is. You can also see at the top of the bar, we have a histogram. If you want to make brute force changes, for example, grab the exposure, you just put your mouse here, left click, and drag this, there we go, to the right or to the left. So you can adjust various elements like the shadows, the blacks, the highlights, literally just grabbing it and brute forcing it. We're going to do it manually though. So I'm going to go first tab, light. And I'm going to just take up the exposure a little bit. You can keep your eye on the histogram up above here, or you could just grab it and crank it to the right. Now remember, we did a levels/curves adjustment that did sort of balance this out, but I think that looks pretty good. It's probably a little too bright right now. Now contrast, we already did a lot of contrast in Twinmotion with this shot, so I'm going to leave that one alone. Highlights and whites will work hand in hand. So highlights will be the brightest parts of the image. You can see the sky, but I actually find that sky is very bright. So I'm going to bring it back down to being a little bit more gray. And then the whites are effectively just going to be exactly what it sounds like, the whites in the image. And you can see they'll be the extreme sort of on the right here on the histogram. So with these, depending on the image you're working with, I'm going to move these back a little bit as well to the left. Shadows and blacks are exactly what it sounds like. Lately, I've been doing a lot of really dropping the blacks to be very, very dark, but then lifting up the shadows. So you get more of the color range, if you will, in the mediums, but the blacks, the darkest parts of the image tend to be extremely black. I think that works okay. I wish there was a magic setting you could just use. You could try and hit the auto button here, but honestly, better off doing this by hand. Now, one thing to note with the blacks, you got to be careful about this because my color balance on my monitor might be different to yours, which might be different to someone's phone. So, you know, you can darken this black slider a little bit here, but I would avoid too dark. So just something to keep in mind. Now, color. Generally what I'll do here, and this is the same thing I've been doing for years, is if the temperature is okay, you know, the lighting is overall okay. So here you can see, take the temperature to the left, blue, right, kind of bright and orange. I'm pretty happy with this. I might add a little bit more warmth, a tiny smidge. But generally, I'll grab the vibrance, and I'll take the vibrance up and take the saturation down. And so what this kind of will do is, vibrance will make each, think of vibrance as a smarter version of saturation. So move the vibrance to the right, about 20 is good. Take the saturation down a little bit. It basically makes each color more pronouncedly colorful, but then desaturates them quite a bit as well. Under effects, we've got texture, clarity, we've got a whole bunch of things here. I think of texture and clarity as basically large and medium contrasts. So generally what I'll do is just like somewhere around 10 or 20 on these sliders. I don't really pay that much attention to it. Just put some texture, put some clarity. Now you can probably see it if we kind of look at some of these areas over here. So let's just Control-Z that and look at the texture slider. Crank it all the way up. And if we crank it all the way down, you can see kind of blurs those edges a bit. So always add a bit of texture and always add a little dash of clarity. Both of these will work hand in hand to make everything just a little bit sharper, pops a little bit more. Now, dehaze is useful for giving your work a dreamy, ethereal quality. It's not fog. Like you can use it for like a fog effect, but it's not really sort of what it's intended for. But it will give it a sort of dreamy, ethereal quality if you want. And if we take it all the way up, you can see to the right just kind of exactly what it's doing here. And then if we take it all the way to the left, you can see what it's actually doing. Now, I would suggest less. When in doubt, just a little bit. Now, a vignette is going to darken the edges or lighten the edges, depending on what setting you actually want. And grain is going to add a little bit of noise, which is something we'll add on two different sliders. We take the grain all the way up, you can see just how much noise it's adding to the shot. So I'll generally just, on an 8K image, 10 or 20% will give you just a little bit of visual noise which is really what you want. So it doesn't look as computer generated. You want it to look a little bit more realistic, so a little bit less perfect. Curves, I'm not really going to do anything. We'll do a couple of these later on. It's the same as the curve adjustment layer. Color mixer. Now this is important because this is going to allow us to adjust the individual elements of the image. So if I'm looking at the oranges here, and by the way, the adjustments, you can do this with the hue, saturation, or color. I like to do it with everything available to me. It just depends on your workflow. So the browns, you see if I take the browns or the oranges up, you can see how it affects those lights, but it's only really affecting the browns or oranges. So what we could actually do is leave the saturation there and take the luminance, which is the brightness out. So I'm going to take those up a little. Now we've got some green in this shot as well. And I'm going to make it a bit more saturated, a little bit more green, and just make it a little bit... I'll make it darker, but I'll make the saturation higher. And that way the green will pop in those areas. Now I've also got some magentas and purples, so we'll do the same. I want these to pop a little bit more and make them brighter. And the same with the purples as well. Now you want to be careful. Sometimes the sky will have blues and purples in there. And so if you're trying to adjust the plants, you may end up adjusting everything. So just keep that in mind. Yeah. Color grading. I don't really do a huge amount of this unless it's in a LUT or a preset. So I'm just going to ignore that. But you could tint the shadows and things like that. Not really my jam. Detail. We will use detail. So remember, texture, clarity are large and medium, but the detail slider is going to be that super fine fidelity. It'll give your work almost like a D5 render look. So generally, I don't mess with a lot of these. I would just put this at about 20-ish, and that's good enough at an 8K image. I don't really want it to be much higher. It can look a little bit too much, and we'll do one more pass of sharpening anyway in a minute. Now, lens blur, we're going to come back to that, so I am just going to go and click OK. We'll use lens blur for our actual depth of field. Okay, so you can see the original Lightroom or Camera Raw. So original and the Camera Raw. It's already looking a little bit better. So we have a couple more things to do. Let's come in here and add a little bit of fog. So I'm going to add a brand new layer. So go down here to the plus icon right beside the trash can. And for this, I'm going to open my brush tool over here on the left. And you can see in the top, we've got some options. And I've got a drop-down menu here to pick a different type of brush. Now, I'll link out to these. We're going to use a set of brushes from ArchVis 9. And this, we're going to scroll down here. We're going to use a mixture of these clouds 2, 3, and 4. I'll link out to this set in order to load them into Photoshop. Just double-click on the download. It'll be, I think, a .abr. It's a brush download. So let's grab clouds. Let's do clouds 3 first. And if I change my clouds to black and I brush, you can see how this brush is working. It does add a bit of noise and the angle of the brush changes. Basically, it's jitter is what's going on. Now, I'm going to hit X on my keyboard just to toggle between black and white, black and white. I'm on a new layer, which I'm going to call fog. There we go. And I'm going to drop the intensity or the opacity of this brush down to about 50. Now, one thing to keep in mind, I'm going to make the brush quite large near the camera. And I'm just going to brush in this fog. Now, as we get further away from the camera, I'm going to start dropping the fog scale of this brush down. And as we get further way back over there, I'm going to drop it quite low. Now, that looks good, but I'm also going to use another round using a different, which is clouds 4. And again, I'm on the same layer, but this is going to add just a little bit more variation. The last thing you want with fog or clouds or really anything organic like that is to be a very repeating tiling pattern, and we don't really want that. Okay, pretty happy. Let's put a few tendrils kind of coming up here as well. Now, this looks very good, but it's very bright. So over here on the right, I'm going to change the blend mode, which is this drop-down menu right here. I'm going to put this to screen, and then I'm going to drop the opacity just a little bit. It's nice. I'm going to duplicate this layer, so we'll have 2 fog layers, and this one is going to, I'm going to put to lighten, and again, just drop the opacity. So between these two, we've got kind of a nice blend of different fogs, and I might do maybe one more fog pass just to give it a bit more of an organic look, and I'll use clouds. Let's use clouds 2, which doesn't have as much of a random factor, I believe. I think this brush is just very... There we go. Yeah. Filling in some of those gaps. And again, this is going to be fog 3. And we can just drop the opacity on this one. Pretty happy with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this new background copy. This was the Lightroom one. So I'm going to duplicate that one more time. And I'll call this Camera Raw. I keep calling it Lightroom, but it's Camera Raw. And I'm going to hold down Shift to select all of these, my fog layers and this duplicate of the Camera Raw, and right-click and merge them. Now, I'm kind of done with these older layers here, layer 1, the new backgrounds. Then I'll hold down Shift and select all of these, and then go right down here to the new layer icon and put them in a folder or group. And I'll just call this Old Stuff. There we go. The fog then, I'm going to rename as New, BKG again, just New Background, just for my own organization. And then I'm going to right-click and duplicate it one more time. Now we're going to do some burning and dodging. So over here on the Tools palette, I've got a... Scroll on down here if I can find my tools. There we go. Burn and dodge. Now, burn and dodge is going to allow us to selectively adjust the highlights, midtones, and shadows. We can make those 3 elements lighter, or we can make those 3 elements darker. So I'm going to go look at dodging first, which is going to brighten the image. And I'm going to pick the highlights. And I generally drop the exposure of this brush pretty low up here. I don't want this to blow out things too much. I'm going to left click. And so what I'm working on is the highlights. I'm lightening the brightest parts of the image. And what I'm going to do here is try and make sure I get the viewer's attention on the home and some of the clouds in the background. I'm going to change from highlights to midtones. And you could do this in other ways. This is just the way that I kind of learned to do this. So I'm lightening up those midtones. And then lastly, do I want to lighten up some of the shadows? Over here, I do. The clouds that we have up in the sky over there. Very nice. Now, I'm going to do the same, but I'm going to change from the dodge tool to the burn tool. And I'm going to darken some of the shadows. I'm going to just do this on the water. Yeah, it works like just a big brush. And then the midtones. Do I want to darken some of the midtones? And then lastly, the highlights. Can I darken the sky on the right? I think I can. There we go. Now, I do this on its own layer. And sometimes I'll just run it around the edges as well, like a bit extra stronger vignette. And then this can allow me to toggle it on and off and on and off. And I'll usually then just drop the opacity. So I'm getting a blend between the old layer and then the burn and dodge layers. And I think that works pretty nicely. Now, let's add another new layer. And what I want to do is I want to bring in some more brightness. So I'm going to just grab my brush tool and I'm going to change back to just the default brush, which is under General Brushes. And this will be the big, soft, fluffy white brush. I'm going to just use the bracket keys to make my brush a bit larger. I'm going to give it a slight... So see, can we add a slight tint to the sky here? And then I'm going to do one more in white. I just want to lighten this area. There we go. Quite happy with that. Change the blend mode to lighten or screen. I think screen will get rid of the yellow, but I think we'll also... There we go. I'm pretty okay with how that's looking. Now, I'd like to maybe take another pass at the sky over here. So I'm going to just go, what we'll do is we'll merge all of these again. So if we're happy with it, we can merge them, or we can select all 3 layers here, 1, 2, and 3, right-click and duplicate those layers, and then right-click and just merge the duplicates. We can turn off the visibility on the old layers. And again, or we can just put these old layers into their own folder. We're kind of done with them now. And then we'll just put this back to new BKG. Basically, we're resetting kind of the clock every time we make some changes and we're happy with it. Duplicate this one more time. I'm going to zoom in on these clouds over here and let's see, can we just bring back a little bit of that kind of brightness? So I might grab a soft paintbrush. I'm going to paint in a slightly warmer cream over there. And we're going to work very soft here, just in the sky. Actually, I need to do that on a new layer. So Control-Z to step back. I also want to bring in a bit more of an interesting sky color, just a tiny dash for the clouds. I'm going to put that to screen. And then just drop the blend mode just a little bit. Now you can see I've gone onto the hillside over in the distance, so I don't want that. So I'm going to go down here to where it says FX, and to the right of it, I'm going to add a mask, and you can see we now have a mask right here. I'm going to grab my paintbrush, and I am just going to switch back to black. And as I paint on the mask, it will get rid of the changes on this layer. You can see it's no longer applying the color information, is being masked or hidden away. Okay, I think that looks pretty nice. Let's go and merge this fella down. So we need to do a couple more things before we start wrapping it up. I'm going to go back to my Arch-9 brush set. Brush tool. I'm going to scroll on down here. You can see we've got lots of different fun things to play with. But the one I'm going to look for is birds. And this is going to act like a stamp. So whatever brush, for example, if I had red on my brush and I stamped, let's make this brush really big, you can see the birds will come in red. I don't want them to be like that. That seems obviously a bit weird. So let's just go and put these to kind of gray. I don't want them to be full black. I think that would look kind of odd. And then I'll put the birds just sort of off in the middle distance. It's probably a bit too soft on that one. And I'm going to put them on a brand new layer. And I think scale them up just a tad. And then way off in the distance, I've got birds. And the ones off in the distance, I think I'll make fully... Let's make them a little bit bigger. And a set that's a little bit smaller. Just a small little thing right there. Pretty happy with the overall look of this. Let's merge all three of these layers down. All right, pretty good. And then we're going to do a few more adjustment layers, I think, and then we might do one more pass in Camera Raw, and we'll add in our depth of field effect as well. So one trick we can do is go Image and Image Rotation, flip Canvas horizontally. And when you do it this way, you kind of get a different feel for the image. And then I'm also going to go down to the adjustment layers, and I'm just going to grab a black and white adjustment layer. And I just want to see... You can see I really need a mixture of really dark darks, mediums, and sort of grays. Like you want a more balanced image, I think, on this one. And I think, yeah, I think we need to darken certain areas and lighten a few more. So with that little guy done, I'm just going to delete this adjustment layer. I don't need it, but it gives me an idea of what we might have to do. Go to Adjustments, and I'm going to look at my Levels adjustment again, and I'm going to click on the histogram to update it. And I'm just going to start moving these sliders. We can also use the Auto button and ask Photoshop to figure it out, or use the presets where we go darker or increase contrast, things like that, or light and shadows. Midtones, brighter, I don't think so. I think we want to keep the darks in there. Okay, so let's put this to, I think just darker will work just fine. You can say, do you have a spike of really dark areas there? So let's move these to the right. Very nice. And then right-click and merge that down. Now, one other thing we can do is right-click and duplicate that layer again. We're going to go to Filter, Other, and High Pass. And a high-pass filter is basically just going to find the edges of the image. So it's going to get us some really fine detail back. I got a radius of 0.9. Click OK on that. And you can see it's a grayscale layer. So what I need to do is change the blend mode up here to overlay. And this will then give us some nice fidelity. So off, on, off, on. Hard to see, but you can see it on the screen. No problem. All right, let's swing our image background again. So image rotation, flip canvas horizontally. And all in all, I'm very much liking kind of the sky, the color, and the mood that we're kind of getting with this. So I'm going to right click and merge down that high pass filter layer. I'm going to duplicate this one more time. We're going to start adding a little bit of depth of field on this as well. We can do this in two ways: filter, camera raw filter, and lens correction, or sorry, lens blur. So I'll click on that here. We'll take a minute to analyze the image. But if we turn on visualize depth, you can see the areas where it is applying some sort of blur. And we can also adjust this ourselves manually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blur the section that's very close to the camera, the fog. You can also use this point and click approach to target the things you want in focus. Now, I think that this lens effect, it can work really well. It's also a little bit too strong at times. And so you can kind of see as we drag this around. It's getting at the front and it's getting the top of the building. So what I think we'll do instead, now by the way, if this works really well, great. I think just having it blurring here is okay. I'm going to drop the blur amount to about 20. And then I'm going to click OK. So now the rocks near the front are going to be quite out of focus. So off, on, off, on. Little bit. And then what I'm actually going to do here is duplicate this little guy one more time. And then I'm going to hand paint with the blur tool. Blur tool is over here on the left. It's going to act like a brush. I'll move all of this stuff out of the way. And the areas I want to blur are going to be over here in the background. And I'm just brushing. It's kind of slow, a little bit unresponsive on an 8K image. But I'm just painting in basically blur or depth of field. And then I'm going to do it on the trees on the top left up here. It can be a little hard probably for you guys on YouTube to see this, but you'll definitely notice you kind of brush it in and then you release your mouse and Photoshop will kind of update. It takes a minute or two, sort of like a few seconds really, to update after you brush something in or out, as Photoshop kind of works out, you know, on a per pixel basis what to do. Now, I'm pretty happy with those. Now let's drop the opacity on these blur layers as well. And then I'm going to hold down Shift and merge these little guys. I think that looks good. I'm going to duplicate it one more time. Do one more pass in Filter, Camera Raw. And then I think what we'll actually do is add in some more imperfections because it's looking nice. And I think I kind of want to brighten certain areas a little bit more. So because we're on our own layer here, you could come in and go browse. Remember how we said we've got these little guys that you can use. And I will just run through these and just see if you like the look of any of them. Now, I love the Modern 9 and 8. I think they really do a nice job. Modern 8 is bringing some lovely warmth back in. So I'm going to click on that, but it is very strong. So I'll drop the strength of that down to about there. 50%. Click OK. Now, I don't necessarily want that warmth on the house. You can see it's lovely on the sky. So I need to add a mask. So again, back down here, add that little mask. Grab a soft, fluffy paintbrush, which will be here. Make sure you're not painting with the birds. Soft brush. And on the mask, making sure the mask is highlighted, not the layer, the mask. Start brushing that out. We've got enough lovely kind of glow going on there. That's good. But I like what it did in the other sections. Off. On. just added a little bit of warmth back into this image. I'm going to drop the intensity of that layer again, right click and merge down. Duplicate it one more time. You'll notice we duplicate as we go, and we're going to go filter, not camera raw. We're going to go lens correction. And what we'll do here is come over, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on these green areas maybe. And we want to add a little bit more imperfections. And so we can just grab like the red cyan fringe, and if I take it all the way to the left, you can kind of see it's adding in quite a bit of distortion. So maybe about there. Click OK. And it's just hard to see, but if you pass this on to someone else, they'll see it. It's adding that chromatic aberration. Now, one more thing we can do with this. I use Luminar Neo, which is sort of an AI-powered one. So what I can also do here is, when I'm happy with all of this, I'm actually going to go Image and Duplicate. And then I'm going to merge everything. Merge layers and duplicate it one more time. And then I can go Filter, Skylum Software, and Luminar Neo. Now, I don't need to do this. I'll show you the Luminar Neo way, and then I'll show you another way to blend. But Luminar Neo, about $100. I think it's pretty good for some of the AI tools. It's pretty good as like a finishing pass. If you're not a photographer, you might not use sort of everything in it. But I think for certain things, it's going to look pretty good. So we fired up Luminar Neo, and here's our, the image we've been working on. Starting to look a bit painterly. Under the presets tab here, we've got all of these other like presets that you can apply. They're kind of, you could like put on, for example, scenery, and then just press these and just kind of adjust the sliders. I think a lot of them they're kind of AI driven, I believe, and they can be a little bit strong. But where we really just want to get a little bit of a sun ray going on here. So I'm just going to go Edit. And you can see we've got all of these different options. The AI enhancer is up here. Now, I'm not entirely sure how this really works. I think it just reads the image a little bit. It's not quite an AI enhance and replacer the way like Leonardo or Krea or Topaz is. But you can just basically just grab this and crank it up a little bit and just see how it looks. Now, to me, that's a little bit too much. It's like enhancing, but it's making just everything too brilliant. But just a little dash might go a long way. Sky Enhancer is going to do the same thing. You can see it's taking that gray sky and just bringing some color back into it, which is very nice. Now, one thing I do want to mess with, though, is the sun rays. I'm going to place our sun center. And depending on, you can do this over on the right or on the left. Just sort of depends. Although it's a little bit odd. We've got two kind of very bright spots in the sky here. I'm just going to put it over here. And then I'm going to just crank the amount. And you can see mad gold rays. Ooh, so shiny. I'm going to place them where I think the brightest spot would be, which would be just down here. And then I'm going to just look at the penetration slider. Will determine by how much I think goes through objects. I want a nice cap. The sun ray length is exactly what it sounds like. Do you want the sun rays kind of coming all the way off? I want a medium one. And then the amount is just sort of literally the amount of sun rays, basically. And so we'll go on somewhere around here. And do I want it to lighten the image a little bit? Just a dash. I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go and apply those as well. So it's a small thing, two different techniques that we can do. There's a lot more stuff that we could potentially add to this as well. This is, once you're done, I'm using the Luminar Neo plugin there. So once you're done, it just sort of saves it and then puts it on a layer, which is really, really nice. There we go. And so there's the original here, and then here's the Luminar Neo changes. Again, it's on its own layer, so I can just drop these. And I think I'll just flatten the image. Do Control-A to copy, Control-C, and let's go back to the image we were working on, which is this one, and paste it in just like that. Now, if you go all the way to the bottom here, the old stuff layer, remember this? This was the original image. It's a bit gray, a bit overcast. And this is our post-produced image with that fog, the birds, and the sky being a bit more visually interesting. And what's really great about, again, we're working in Photoshop here, So at any point, you could just kind of go, yeah, I like this image, but maybe I just want to soften all the changes. Just drop those layers a little bit. About 70% will give you a nice blend. Even 50 would give you a nice blend of all the Photoshop work that we've done, but it's not as just sort of meh and gray as the original image. I think that will work just fine. A couple of other things we could also do. I'm going to open up some of the other render passes from this. So one more thing we might want to try is, again, duplicate, go image, duplicate. And I'm going to flatten this little guy. Then we'll go image and image size. And I'm going to put it percent-wise down to 25% on the width and the height. And you can see it's basically a HD image, and save it. And then we're going to open this up in Leonardo AI. So here we are in Leonardo AI. I've loaded up the low resolution image. I've kept the upscale multiplier to just 1. I don't want it resizing the image. And I put the creativity strength up to 7. Now, depending on how you feel about AI, that's a whole other topic. But for perhaps just enhancements, those kind of work okay. It's not going to replace the actual artist, but you never know what it will do with an image. In this case, it's done some pretty trippy things. But those skies and the clouds in the background and some of the bird replacement, I'm actually pretty happy with. The building's too noisy. But let's put this maybe down to 6 and hit the upscale button, and we'll see what it actually does. Very similar response. So let's just download it in Photoshop. We'll open it up and then resize it. Image, image size. So we've resized the AI image and we pasted it on top. There's certain parts I kind of like, certain parts we don't like. So let's add a mask. And I'm going to the area I like is the clouds over here on the right. The rocks and everything have gotten a bit too much. So we're going to paint those out. I do actually quite like the birds. I mean, I love the painterly look of those birds. They're super cute. But for this, let's just see if we can get some of the nicer looking birds back in. And the clouds, I think I did a much nicer job with the clouds. Switch back to white with your brush. Make sure you're on the mask. Did a nice job with those trees over there too. Did an okay job over there. But I'm keeping pretty much everything else. Yeah, the birds are okay. They don't look insane. Some of these like AI creations that are just absolutely insane. What do the fog look like? The rocks. Some of the rocks look a little bit better, so I might keep those. But this like waterfall effect that I put in there, no thank you. Not what we wanted. There we go. Slightly AI enhanced. This bird down here has just gone absolutely insane, so let's just bring that fellow back a little bit. Now, and with that being done, I think we are done here for today. So here we go. The original from Twinmotion with all the imperfections, no birds, kind of drab sky. And I think really the only thing I would probably change looking at this is maybe taking down the fog. I think I did a bit too heavy-handed on the fog if I was doing it again. But I am overall much happier with the end result. Now, please note, this approach, this painterly approach, this will work very well for portfolios, for, resume sort of building stuff. Don't necessarily know that it's suitable for production renders, but the steps are in many ways mostly the same. You're just going to be doing a lot less of the painterly work and sticking more with camera raw more than anything. That's especially true if you're trying to keep a consistent look for multiple images, in which case you can't afford to have one image look more painterly and the other look more like hyper-realistic. But if you're just working on portfolio pieces, this is sort of what I would end up doing. This is how I approach Photoshop at the moment. And these are some of the same techniques I've been using since back in the day when I was doing stuff with ZBrush. And so hopefully, if you're just starting out, this gives you a good idea of how to work with Photoshop for post-production for a bit more of a painterly feel. All right, I'm going to go ahead and leave it there for today. I'll see you in the next video, which will be in a few weeks' time. All right, see you then. Cheers.